Hey, so this is my first video. I just wanted to talk about the new Deshaun Watson news, and it made me think about all the recent trades in NFL history, just thinking about how each of them turned out, and I'm focusing specifically on the quarterbacks. So I guess let's just go from most recent backwards. For the last few, I'll cover the Aaron Rodgers trade, the Russell Wilson trade, the Bryce Young trade, and the Deshaun Watson trade. And I guess I'll throw in Trey Lance too, just because, there really hasn't been that much with Trey Lance, but I guess I'll just start with Aaron Rodgers first because it's the most recent. This is my first video. I understand if it's a little awkward for some people with how I go about this. I'm figuring it out myself too, and I appreciate the people just sticking along. So, anyways, in this last offseason, Aaron Rodgers was traded to the Jets for the number 13 pick, the number 42 pick, and the number 207th pick, along with the conditional second round pick that became a first if Aaron Rodgers played a set number of games. Obviously, he tore his Achilles in the first game of the season, and that didn't happen. The Jets got a first back, so it was like they swapped picks in the first, as well as they got a pick 170, which I believe is a sixth round pick in the trade. So honestly, Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles, but it's insane what he's doing with that. Somehow he's expecting to be back in December, which is mind-boggling. I don't know how he's doing it. I don't know if he'll get back in time. I don't know if the Jets will stay competitive. Their division keeps kind of losing. The Dolphins are 6-3, but they really haven't beat a competitive team yet. The Bills just lost to the Broncos, and they lost to the Bills. They lost to the Jets earlier in the year with Zach Wilson. That was the game that Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles. And they could honestly stay in the wild card round. I know how good the Ravens, the Steelers, the Browns, and the Bengals are, and they could all just take all the wild card spots, and it's just going to be one from the AFC East, and that would probably be either the Bills or the Dolphins. But if they stay around 500 and he comes back in December, I don't know what's going to happen. But the point is, so far in this trade, I can't really rate it yet because we just don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how Aaron Rodgers is going to look off his Achilles if he does play this year or if he comes back next year because he is getting up there in age. It seems like he really likes the culture with the Jets from what we've seen in Hard Knocks as well as just in general. But you just kind of have to wait and see on that one. I'm sorry if this isn't the analysis that you're looking for. But there's really just not much to say yet. He's throwing on the field. We got to just see what happens with him, and we'll kind of play it by ear. Next up, we're going back to the Bryce Young trade, where the Panthers moved up from the 9th pick to the 1st and selected Bryce Young. And this one is really tough. I think it's a really bad trade, just the fact that you gave away your best pass catcher. As much as the first round pick that they're giving up this year to the Bears could be Caleb Williams, who is a higher tier prospect than Bryce Young, you honestly can't know that. I don't like looking at picks that way because you want to be competitive. You think if you get your quarterback of the future, you're going to see upward improvement. You're not going to be like, this is going to be the first overall pick next year. As a Giants fan, I personally hope that isn't, but who knows? Caleb Williams was asking for partial ownership in whatever team drafts him. I'd understand that if he just got his extension and maybe he won a Super Bowl in his rookie scale contract, but we don't. But if he's asking for it on draft day, I just don't know. So honestly, Drake May might be the better choice just simply because I feel that he will just be easier to work with. But Caleb Williams is just so talented. And the Bears must be enjoying that because they had DJ Moore. Justin Fields has been injured this year, but they do get all this advantage of seeing how it plays out. And if they do get the first overall pick, which the Panthers don't want to give them, not because it's not their pick, but more so they want Bryce Young to win games. They aren't going to be competitive this year, but they turned down the Brian Burns trade to the Rams for 2 first-round picks last year. They clearly want to keep this core together and try to win. Of course, it's tough to argue Bryce Young was the right pick when you have CJ Stroud right there, and he's in the MVP conversation already. He's doing crazy stuff as a rookie. He broke the record for longest streak without an interception for rookies starting their career. it's just, you just keep seeing all this stuff from Caleb Williams, and it makes Bryce Young not look as good. I mean, D'Amico Ryans is doing a hell of a job. Will Anderson is playing great. Jalen Carter, I think, was better, but all the controversy pushed him down the board. Of course, the Eagles, did the Eagles really need that? Not the point. I'm just going into it because Giants fan, we're not a good team. Just give us the first pick, please. Or the second pick if Giants fans really don't believe in Caleb Williams. I have to believe in him. He listed us as one of his teams. I know I keep going into that, and that's not what this video is about, but I need something as a Giants fan. New York is just tough right now. Knicks are 5-5. They're good, but they don't have that star yet. I'm sorry for going into these tangents. That's just how I am. But Bryce Young lost DJ Moore. He doesn't really have a great weapon. Adam Thielen, his number one target, and he's 33. The Vikings let him go. They didn't need him anymore. They drafted Jordan Addison. It's just not really the type of trade that not the type of prospect they hoped that he would be, essentially. And they still have all these picks to pay off, as well as the loss of DJ Moore. But I think they could potentially build around him. I'm not giving up on Bryce Young. I did like him in college. It's just, it's tough with CJ Stroud there and potentially them losing out on Caleb Williams. I guess just continuing going back, let's just cover Trey Lance really quickly. The 49ers thought they were a quarterback away. They traded up to the number 3 pick. They got Trey Lance. They traded multiple first-round picks to the Dolphins, who got that pick from the Texans because of Laramie Tunsil. And then the Dolphins traded back up to 6, got Jalen Waddle. They got Trey Lance. They decided to stick with Jimmy G for their first year because a lot of quarterbacks sit out their first year, kind of start learning the offense, where they can kind of start understanding, oh, this is how Kyle Shanahan wants me to play. He ends up coming in the next year. They're expecting him to be the guy of the future, and he's out for the year. You hate to see it for any player, and specifically, I actually like the 49ers. Obviously, Giants first, but 49ers are probably my second favorite team. I love C-Mac. It's just, he never really got his chance to shine, and then Brock Purdy shows up after Jimmy G also gets injured last year, and he has a good season. He goes undefeated until they lose to the Eagles, where he was injured at the beginning of that game, so it wasn't even his fault. So he just kind of has to keep dealing with these problems, and they're not going to bench Brock Purdy for Trey Lance, and they don't even want to bring up the doubt there, so they just trade him to the Cowboys for a 4th-round pick. And maybe you're like, he gets a chance on the Cowboys. And while it's a bad trade for the 49ers because they traded 3 first-round picks to get Trey Lance, who ultimately turned into a later 4th-round pick for them while there were so many good players on the board, you just can't – we can't even see him there because Dak Prescott's playing amazing right now. His connection with CD is insane. 4 straight games of 150 yards and 10-plus receptions. I have him in my fantasy league, and I'm just stoked about that. It's just crazy how good he is. And right now, and Trey Lance is never going to get a chance there unless Dak is injured, which we just got to kind of have to wait and see on. So Trey Lance might never get to play in the league, which is a darn shame because I didn't really see him in college. But all the sportscasters' hype around him, I really wanted to see him. I knew he was a great runner. He looked interesting. He went to a great team, where you kind of want that because sometimes you're stuck in the Bryce Young situation where the Panthers just don't have much on their team to really help him, so he doesn't really get the support. But Trey Lance did have that support, and then he comes to Dallas where he gets the support again, but he's just never going to get to start. And I just don't see him starting in his rookie scale contract. Jordan Love was kind of the same situation. He gets to start this year simply because Aaron Rodgers wanted out, and the Packers were like, he's not the MVP this year. We can finally let him go. So that's just how it kind of is right now, and I feel bad for Trey Lance a lot. I hope he does get his chance. I know he's a good player, and if he's given the chance, I feel like he'll be able to figure it out. Maybe he might not be a top 3 quarterback in the league, top 5, maybe if not top 10. But I think there's something in him. Like, Zach Wilson looks better this year. He doesn't look amazing, but he looks better. And that's because the Jets keep giving him the chance. Trey Lance doesn't get that. So, Yeah, that's just kind of my feelings on Trey Lance. I'm just sorry. So, Russell Wilson trade, I guess I'll go into next, where the Broncos wanted to do something. They hadn't won since Peyton Manning left. They have such a good defense. It, Patrick Surtain is a first-team All-Pro caliber corner. They had Bradley Chubb back then. They had all these picks, and Drew Lock wasn't good enough to get them to the promised land because you need a quarterback. That's why I'm on the Giants, Caleb Williams or Drake May train, because as good as Daniel Jones I think could be, arguably at his best, he's somewhere around a top 12 quarterback. And that's like at his best, like in certain games, like the second half of the Arizona game or in the Vikings playoff game, I'd put him there. Everyone else, I'd just simply, he kind of slides somewhere where on average, maybe last year, 15th through 18th quarterback. Not even the person I'm talking about. I'm just sad about the Giants, so apologize for all these tangents. So they just knew Drew Lock wasn't going to be good enough, and Russell Wilson was available. They ended up trading for him. They traded multiple first-round picks, Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, and they were like, we got our guy. They hoped it was Aaron Rodgers originally because Nathaniel Hackett was their head coach, and he was super close with Aaron Rodgers. That's why he's the offensive coordinator now of the Jets, because of Aaron Rodgers. But they just kind of wanted him to be the guy, and they figured our defense is good enough. I like Courtland Sutton. I like Jerry Jeudy. I liked their team, and Russell Wilson just didn't show out. A lot of the blame went on Nathaniel Hackett here because he just didn't seem like he knew what to do. He had bad clock management. A lot of their losses came at that. Their defense was super great last year. It really didn't let up that many points. And I know it's in a super tough division on top of the AFC just being stacked quarterback-wise, so you have to compete at that position, but it's just tough to kind of put him there. He signed an extension. They can't really get off of him. He looks slightly better this year with Sean Payton, but they're just kind of being like, we already invested. We got to just keep going in. The Ram strategy, essentially. They're like, Russell Wilson didn't work right now, so let's just get Sean Payton. I don't care if it costs us a first-round pick because he retired from the Saints, but he still technically had the rights from the Saints. So he just needed. They're like, we're giving him that team. We're giving Sean Payton the Broncos, and it's turning out okay. They're 4-5, I think, right now. They just beat the Bills in that super close 12-man on the field missed field goal attempt to get the win over the Bills, but they did win. They're not in an awful position, obviously, with just how much of a juggernaut everyone is in the AFC South. I believe it's AFC South. It's the Ravens division. It's just hard to see them make the playoffs right now. And I just don't know what they're going to do. They're kind of stuck here. They have some players. Jerry Jeudy seemingly wants to move. They seemingly want to move Jerry Jeudy, who I liked. I mean, he was the first pick in that draft. 4 wide receivers before Justin Jefferson and CD, who both look amazing right now. It's just, I hope they figure something out. I do like the Broncos as well. Russell Wilson, I hope he starts clicking. He started doing all those commercials and getting his own office in Denver, and it never really worked last year. This year it might not work either because somehow the Steelers are just always crazy good. Mike Tomlin is amazing, and they'll just always be 500 plus, especially now 17 games, so they'll always be 9-8 or 8-1 at worst because that's just how Mike Tomlin plays. And you just have to think they'll figure it out eventually. Sean Payton will maybe have another year in the offense and understanding the team better next year, and they might be competitive. Obviously, they have to deal with the Chargers, the Raiders, and the Chiefs, who are all pretty good, and I like Antonio Pierce as the Raiders head coach, interim head coach. Hopefully will be the head coach after the season, but just that's kind of where we're at right now with Russ. He's playing okay. Honestly, the last one is the Deshaun trade, and it's weird because he's 5-1 this year. He's not playing amazing, but their defense is so good. It's arguably the best defense in the league. I don't know, maybe the Chase Young added to the 49ers defense is better, or the Cowboys defense, or the Eagles defense, or maybe the Chiefs defense, but it's definitely up there. I mean, that team has already beat the Ravens. It has beat the 49ers this year, two of the top teams that people are predicting to be in the Super Bowl. But sadly, he fractured his glenoid in his right shoulder, which seemingly is the joint that connects like the arm and the shoulder together. So it creates like instability, and it needed to be have surgery to fix, and he's out for the rest of the year. I mean, PJ Walker could carry this team maybe to the playoffs, but are you trusting PJ Walker to win a Super Bowl? Are we giving the Cleveland Browns defense, especially without Nick Chubb on the year, the chance to be Nick Foles and somehow get to the Super Bowl? Even then, Carson Wentz played at least a little in the playoffs and for the rest of the regular season, for the majority of the regular season, where he was in the MVP race. Deshaun isn't that. Amari Cooper is really good, and I could see them being in an interesting position, but I just don't know. They traded for Deshaun because they were like, Baker Mayfield's not it. He's been declining. He had this amazing run of the 11-3 and played the Chiefs in the playoffs, got them their first playoff win. But they were just like, he's not good enough to get us there. And a lot of teams think that way if they don't have like a top 5 guy. If they don't have a Trevor Lawrence, a Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow, or just a team that's so generational that it doesn't care about the quarterback. Like the quarterback is average, but they are good enough to carry the team as a game manager with how good the rest of the team is. Kind of like how the 49ers are. I do think Brock Purdy's good. I'm not saying Brock Purdy isn't good when I'm saying the 49ers like that. I'm just like the 49ers team is just so stacked. It's like I always say this, and I'm not taking any credit away from Tom Brady. He turned the Bucs around with like his culture. But that Super Bowl where the Chiefs had 2 offensive linemen down, when I was watching that game, their defense was pretty much at Patrick Mahomes within a second every single play. And I think probably a lot worse quarterbacks could have won that Super Bowl game. Only the Super Bowl game. The rest of the road in the regular season and the playoffs, that's all Tom Brady. I just think that Super Bowl, he did play well. He did win Super Bowl MVP. It's just the team played so well that I think that the majority of quarterbacks could have won that game. And I'm not trying to say anything against Tom Brady. He's the greatest quarterback of all time. He definitely turned that team around. I don't want to say this, and I feel like I'm going into it, so I apologize. I'll probably make a tangent segment here for this. But Jameis Winston threw 30 picks the year before, and they were 500, I'm pretty sure. You're telling me if an average quarterback throws 20 less picks, maybe even like 15 less picks, they don't win like 3 more games? They're not in the playoffs. Their defense was really good. Gronk came and that helped, and same with AB, and those were Tom Brady additions. Tom Brady brought those players, and I'm not taking stuff away. He thought these players would help the team. I can manage AB, at least to some extent. For that year, he did, and it's just like, how much credit do people give for Tom Brady with the Bucs? I'm not saying like the COVID year excuse or anything, because he didn't get training camp with them. It's just, I thought that team was really good already, and a lot of people did too, but a lot of people who are Tom Brady defenders will just be like, that team was awful. Tom Brady came there. Like Skip Bayless is like, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he took that team and brought them to the Super Bowl. They were awful the year before, and I just don't think it's that case. Once again, Tom Brady did definitely help improve the culture there, which ultimately led them to win more games. And having Tom Brady as your quarterback definitely adds confidence to the team, which isn't even the point of this video, because he's not even traded. He was just let go by the Patriots. So we're moving back to Deshaun, I guess. I'm sorry for that tangent. I don't dislike Tom Brady. I'm a Giants fan. We have the least hate against Tom Brady simply because we actually beat him twice in the Super Bowl. Once again, I think he's the greatest quarterback of all time. It's just that I'm just saying this because it came out and it's my opinion on the Buccaneers season at least. So yeah, the Browns thought that they weren't good enough. Sorry, just for how I'm just trying to slide back into the Deshaun trade. And they took the risk on Deshaun because Deshaun was crazy good. And the Texans just didn't treat him right. Like, Bill O'Brien traded D-Hop for like nothing, and that really hurt. He sat out for a year, and then he signed an extension, then he sat out for a year. He had the massage stuff happen, which I just don't want to get into. I mean, it's been covered to death, and I don't feel like it's necessary. So, despite all that, he's just so talented that the Browns were like, we're taking the risk. He was a top 5 quarterback before he sat out. And they're like, if we have him with our defense, with Nick Chubb, with Kareem Hunt, with our amazing O-line, we are competitive. I think we can have a run for our money. We could probably win the division. We can compete with Lamar Jackson. We can compete with Mike Tomlin somehow's 500 streak. We can compete with Joe Burrow. We're just in such a tough division. We need a quarterback that can compete with them. So they sign him. They trade for him. They trade multiple first-round picks. They trade a fourth. They trade a third. These trade helps, I guess, because the Texans, I'm pretty sure, use one of these picks to help them get Will Anderson in the trade with the Cardinals last year. Once again, I think Jalen Carter's better right now. I think Will Anderson is really good, though. I don't want to take anything away from him. He's playing great. The sacks aren't there, but the pressures certainly are. And he's a great foundational piece to build the team around. And I guess they just waited. And because of the massage stuff, he was suspended for 6 games in the year. Or was it 10 games? I'm sorry. I had the notes somewhere. I'm just blanking for a sec. I know he only played 6 games last year, so I'm just going to say it's 10. I think it is actually 10. So, and he played, and he wasn't amazing. He had 5 picks, 7 touchdowns, 1,100 yards, and it just wasn't amazing, but everyone gave him the benefit of the doubt. He sat out for now almost a year and 2/3 worth of seasons. He hasn't played. He has to get into a new team. He just has to kind of figure out how the scheme works. He's like, everyone gave him the benefit of the doubt for last year. They were like, we still believe in him. He has to figure it out. And this year, he was 5-1. So if that matters to you, that's what's important ultimately. But he wasn't amazing. There were so many times where he just overthrew the receiver, and it just didn't feel like he knew what he was. Didn't feel like the same old Deshaun that we thought we saw in Houston, and I just felt that it wasn't a good look. While he definitely was winning games, the defense is so prolific that I think PJ Washington could win games. Obviously, they're 6-3 right now. He was 5-1, so they were 1-2 without him. So maybe PJ Washington isn't good enough. Maybe if they had traded for Josh Dobbs, obviously they didn't know the fracture happened this week and the trade deadline passed a few weeks back. So they just couldn't tell for sure. But they're in a tough spot right now. It's tough to keep a defense as well as it is one year into the next. It will still be a top 10 defense. Myles Garrett's there. Denzel Ward's there. It's really good. It's just, I'm not sure how good they can stay. Will they still be like as good as they are now? I don't know. Myles Garrett probably will be. But this trade just doesn't look as good simply on the idea that they knew he sat out for a year. They knew he had to be suspended. But then they doubled down and gave him the fully guaranteed contract. The only one for a quarterback in football history. 5 years, $230 million. And sure, you want to show trust. You're like, we're bringing him in. He's our future. But he already just signed a contract for 4 years, $156 million. Only $110 guaranteed. That goes through 2025. The new deal only goes through 2026. And mind you, that deal, the $156 through 2025, I know it's $110 million guaranteed, which is more than Daniel Jones. But Daniel Jones, if he finishes out his contract, I just don't think he will, because now that he tore his ACL, I don't see the Giants winning more games. I know I'm talking about my Giants again. Just I do that a lot. So when he gets to that, he technically, if he finishes out his contract, would be more than what Deshaun signed, despite Deshaun being like a top 5 guy. Kind of shows how the quarterback market has exploded. But that deal, it was $230 million guaranteed. Everyone thought, oh, all these quarterbacks coming up, the Burrows, the Herberts, the Lamar, and all these guys are going to also want guaranteed contracts because Deshaun got it. Deshaun got it being suspended and sitting out for a year. Burrows made a Super Bowl. And Lamar's won an MVP. They're like, we deserve this too. Kyler's there too. And they're just, and they, no one else gets it because all these other teams are like, we're not giving you this contract. Deshaun's an outlier. We do not want to pay our quarterbacks guaranteed money. You don't know what's going to happen with them. So the fact that they doubled down there despite knowing he was going to be suspended and all this, I don't think it was necessary for them. And I think hopefully Deshaun, after getting the shoulder surgery, is right. And maybe he was just never right this year because he had shoulder problems earlier on in the season. I don't believe it was this because this requires season-ending surgery. But he ranked, based on QBR, the 23rd quarterback this year. So I just hope he gets better and he recovers well. And maybe next year or the year after we see the Deshaun, who we remember from Houston, back for the Browns. And the Browns actually do something. Because I have nothing against the Browns. I don't have anything against most teams. So I just personally don't like to see some teams win or lose simply based on how the Giants are doing. But yeah, so those were the contracts I kind of wanted to talk about. I mean, you could talk about the Bears trading up for Trubisky, I guess. Just, I'll throw this in at the end. They passed on Deshaun and Mahomes, specifically Mahomes, because the Deshaun stuff that's happening with his injury and him being traded. But I think that was more on the Houston's mismanagement. So honestly, it could have been either of those two quarterbacks. And they just, and Trubisky never really got right there. And you could argue it's maybe coaching. You could argue it's anything. I think, like, obviously they took the upside pick, like the Giants was Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones was projected kind of by most people to go in the second round, and he went 6th overall to the Giants. Giants fans were mad that we didn't take Dwayne Haskins. So just, that's kind of how it is. And they just moved on from him because he just wasn't playing up to the standard they'd hoped for a 2nd overall pick. And they were so sure on Trubisky, and that's the thing. It's not even like they traded for Trubisky. It's more like they were the 3rd overall pick, and they're like, the 2nd overall pick team's going to take Trubisky. We know how good Trubisky is. I know Mahomes is there. I know Watson's there, and we could technically recover on one of them. Trubisky, he's just too good. We got to trade up. And once again, these players are risking their lives out there. I have nothing against Trubisky either. It's just, I feel like I have to say he just didn't live up to the draft capital. And that happens for a lot of players because situation matters. Once again, the Bryce Young thing. Who knows? And I guess in the same just vein to finish it off with it, I don't want to judge a team based on, oh, you could have had the 1st overall pick rather than having the 6th pick if instead of trading your pick last year for this player. Well, you just don't know. That player could be really good. That player could be bad. The team without that player might have won more games. For all we know, the Panthers were like, we'll wait another year. We'll make the big slash for Caleb Williams or Drake May. So they were like, we'll wait one more year. Maybe with who they had on their team, they would finish like the 4th or 6th overall pick, and they would probably still have to trade up. And maybe Caleb Williams or Drake May could do more with what their team had. Maybe they wouldn't give up DJ Moore. But just situationally speaking, we don't know how a team would turn out in the hypothetical universe of where these picks went. And that's just what's important. You can't really rate a player based on, oh, you could have gotten player X or player Y instead. So yeah, this is kind of where I'm going to end it. Thank you for watching. I'm sure I appreciate you staying for nearly 30 minutes of just me talking kind of to myself with a lot of tangents. Like I said, it's my first video. If you have any advice or any videos, any topics you want me to cover, be it sports or be it something else, I'll look into it and try if I find an interest in it, because I kind of just want to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And if it interests you as well, I appreciate it. So thank you to the maybe 1 or 2 listeners that are listening to my first video. If it's way more than that, I'm sorry for being mean. I just don't think that I'm going to have that many on this video, at least when it's being published. It's my first video, and you just have to aim low. Expect low. You don't aim low. Expect low when you're watching these videos. When you're starting to post videos, you want to get more consistent, and from what I've seen, and slowly build up people who want to listen to you. And I hope you guys, after listening to this video, want to listen more to me. And if you do, I guess subscribe. Thank you. Have a good night.